wonderful film, the most personal stories. There are so many ways that you can tell a personal story now. Now, obviously, you're a documentary maker, but I wondered why a feature film was right for this one, for you.
Oh, this had to be fiction because there is no evidence, and there's nobody who would talk about the film. Talk about the story. So I actually never, ever considered telling this as documentary. And even though I only decided to make it in my 40s, I'd always thought, I will make this story into a fiction film. Just like I wrote the tale as fiction very early on. Remember, I started to make films when I was 21. I've been doing it a long time. But right through my 20s, I always thought I would like to turn this into a film, but it'll be fiction.
And you use almost a sort of, how can I describe it, a sort of interrogation technique throughout the film where the characters are breaking the fourth wall, talking to the camera. Why did you go down that road?
I didn't know when I started writing how I would tell this story, because how do you show the mind and the way the mind works, and how do you show memory? So in the process, when I wrote this over a long period of time. When I first wrote it, I wrote it all in the backstory. And that was sort of year one because I was making other films. When I looked at that screenplay, I was like, boring. And I wasn't even interested because it's abuse 101. It's so obvious. So I threw it out and I thought I really want to talk about memory and the construction of self and how do we construct our identity. When I did that, I really threw out everything I know about narrative filmmaking and narrative structure. And then I just said, how can I show this? And I started to experiment. But at the same time, I went on a real journey. And in the journey, there were a lot of roadblocks that I couldn't figure out from the truth. The real people wouldn't tell me, and my 13-year-old self doesn't exist anymore. So how do I discover her? How do I discover them when they won't tell me? So that's how I began to come up with these sort of devices of interrogating the past through my imagination. It wasn't so much about the facts, because the facts I never forgot. Even Bill's dialogue is straight, like photographically from memory, like literally. It wasn't about the facts, it was about the take on the story and how I actually played it to myself as one way, when in fact it was maybe many other ways. It was about shifting the perspective of the narrative and investigating the different shifts of the narrative. The question of truth wasn't as much there as the telling, and about how the mind is protective and what it will tell itself. Remember, I didn't use the word sexual abuse till I was 45, and I think of myself as a very honest person. I'm certainly not afraid of facing hard things. I'm known for being someone who faces into the wind, so to speak.
Why was that you didn't use that phrase until you...
I think when I did finally use it, it was, first of all, I was making this film about women called Flying Confessions of a Free Woman. And the film was not about abuse and it wasn't about trauma, it was about freedom. And every woman I talked to, every other woman, didn't matter class, didn't matter color, didn't matter where they lived, had an abuse, a rape story. And it was like, and the sexual abuse stories sounded just like my story, except for, I thought my story was private and personal. I thought it was just me, like literally my own private Idaho, so to speak. And suddenly it was like, oh my God, yeah, this is a universal phenomenon, and I lived in a world of gender. Because on another level, there's a whole other history in my life that I've kind of denied gender. I'm not a girl because girls don't get to do anything. I'm just gender neutral. That had been, and that's the way, I went to shoot a film in Beirut, Lebanon in the middle of the war. I was 21. You know, you don't do that when you're thinking, I'm a girl. You know what I mean? You just don't. It was like, funny enough, I see it with younger women today. There's a way that some women did what I did, which is you put your blinders on and you run. And you say, I can do this. So anyway, here I am admitting in my 40s that I belong to a larger world in which bad things happen to women, and a lot of women. So in a sense, it was like realizing that I couldn't tolerate the narrative that I was weak. I couldn't tolerate the narrative that I was a victim. And in fact, that being a victim would have hurt me more than the abuse. So why go there? Now, I don't want to say that I didn't leave somebody by the road. And there's a part of me that, frankly, when I revisited it, was left huddled in a corner crying. But there's another part of me that was a winner and was a hero. And both things are true. And I think the film is grappling with all those truths.